Ron Davis is the Legislative Affairs Chair of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, or NOBLE. From 2013 to 2017, Mr. Davis directed the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services at the U.S. Department of Justice. In 2014, he was appointed Executive Director of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. Mr. Davis received his BA from Southern Illinois University and completed the Senior Executives in State and Local Government program at Harvard University Kennedy School of Government. Mr. Davis, you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Collins. I want to thank you for hosting this hearing, and I come to you today on behalf of NOBLE and on behalf of our President, Police Chief C.J. Davis, and the Executive Board. We want to again thank you for allowing us to testify today. As you mentioned before, serving as the director of the cops office, I also served close to 30 years as a police officer, 20 years in Oakland, and about 9 years as the police chief in the city of East Palo Alto. I do want to say NOBLE joins the nation in condemning the heinous killing of Mr. Floyd, and we offer our heartfelt condolences and prayers to the Floyd family. And I want to thank Mr. Floyd this morning for his powerful testimony and strong recommendations. Yet, Mr. Chairman, we know that the date George Floyd is just one in a long list of tragedies. We also know that the vast majority, as the Reverend had mentioned, of police officers in this country are decent, honorable, committed men and women to service. But we know that the core problem of policing are not just about a few bad apples. I think too often we focus on the bad apples, and we need to acknowledge, Mr. Chairman, that the problem of policing today is continued use of draconian policing systems that still suffer from structural racism and severe institutional deficiencies. Under these systems, even good cops have bad outcomes, and bad cops and racist cops can operate with impunity. Most of the systems that we are talking about were determined why we police, how we police, where we police, were constructed in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they were actually constructed to enforce Jim Crow and other discriminatory practices. In other words, this committee should acknowledge, the nation needs to acknowledge that our policing systems are in fact not broken. They are doing what they were actually designed to do. To understand this hard truth is to recognize that this system cannot be reformed, it must be reconstructed. It also means that the demand for policing reform should not require an indictment against all police. In fact, it is our hope that our brothers and sisters who wear the badge will not only embrace this moment, but will join this movement and become a part of the change that is needed. We've seen police chiefs and officers walk with crowds and take a knee, and that is great. We now need them to take a stance and stand with the community as we reconstruct this unjust system. The first step in reconstructing a new system is to strengthen police accountability and trust with our communities. This, in fact, was the core charge that President Obama gave the task force on 21st century policing. And in 2015, the task force provided recommendations for police agencies and their communities to advance this. Unfortunately, the Trump administration not only tossed this report away, it has actually retreated backwards to the so-called law and order days in which the mass arrest of men of color was this nation's crime strategy. We need to abandon that dangerous rhetoric. We need to abandon the idea of law and order, and we need to embrace a peace and justice mantra that enhances public safety and ensures justice for all. Mr. Chairman, we need the support of the federal government to further advance the recommendations from President Obama's task force. We also need to make some immediate actions. In the interest of time, I will say that we support the 8 bullets that Benita Gupta outlined with the Leadership Conference of Civil Rights, and I won't go over those 8 bullets since it's already in the testimony. We also believe that we need to immediately rescind the Sessions memo so that the Department Civil Rights Division, Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, can immediately restore the use of consent decrees where appropriate. We believe that we should restore programs within the COPS office that allows police departments to do voluntary reviews so that they can identify deficiencies in their operating systems and structural programs. And we believe that all police agencies should obtain some type of accreditation before receiving federal funds. We also need the federal government's help in supporting local and state efforts. In the absence of this DOJ, it's been the states that have been stepping up. So for example, the state of California and Governor Gavin Newsom passed Assembly Bill 392, the most comprehensive use of force reform bill in the nation. Last week, Governor Newsom also ordered the state to stop teaching the carotid hold or carotid restraints or chokehold, and made clear that he would support any legislation that prohibit those techniques. In Illinois, former Attorney General Lisa Madigan and current Attorney General Kwame Raoul used their office to negotiate with the city of Chicago to adopt the most comprehensive consent decree in the nation's history. And in California, Attorney General Becerra used his office to conduct pattern and practice investigations, provide organizational assessments, and use of force reviews. And most recently in Minnesota, Attorney General Keith Ellison worked with Department of Safety Commissioner John Harrington and used their office to convene a task force, a working group of diverse people to address the issue of police deadly encounters. Now, unfortunately, the group released their report just weeks after Mr. Floyd was killed, so it was too late to unpack that tragedy, but it does provide a roadmap for Minnesota as it moves forward. These are all activities that the Trump administration has
Thank you,
walked away
Mr.
from.
Davis.
And these are all activities that are sorely needed if we're going to address police reform. In some, the recommendations that have been outlined, the ones I just mentioned, the ones that Ms. Gupta outlined, the ones that you've heard today, are all contained in the Justice and Policing Act. And we appreciate Congresswoman Bass, yourself, Mr. Nadler, and all the co-sponsors for introducing this comprehensive bill. And Noble looks forward to working with this body as you move the bill forward. As we proceed, there are immediate steps that I believe police leaders and departments can take. And I want to basically quickly go over 5 points that I would ask my colleagues, police chiefs and police leaders to follow. And that these are the steps that we can do to start the racial reconciliation that was mentioned earlier that we have yet to do, and to start the reimagining policing process. The first step is to publicly acknowledge the historical and current, too often we just say historical, but the historical and current police abuses that occur and its impacts on communities of color. The more police chiefs acknowledge this and do so publicly, the more we can start our reconciliation. Second, the acceptance of responsibility to change our policing system and its culture. 3, I think it is time for all police officers to reaffirm their oath of office to the Constitution and to the core principles of our democracy. And I say that because we need to be reminded that the oath is to the Constitution, not to each other, not to the police department, not to the police union, but to the Constitution and our democracy. 4, collaborate with community to redefine and reimagine policing, including the development of reinvestment strategy that rely less on police or more community-based safety programs. As we debate funding about the departments, I think we can have some core agreement that we definitely we need to invest in the social programs, the community-based programs that go more to the core causes of crime and justice systems.
Mr. Davis, your time has expired. Mr. Davis, thank you for your testimony. Your time has expired.